Welcome. I'm your host, Christina Haskin, and tonight I have a wonderful guest, Hans Wilhelm. I'm welcoming him back, and he's an author and illustrator. Because I'm old enough to remember those Grimm fairy tales, and I love them. I was always fascinated by
They're wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful. A few years ago, when our daughter was a bit younger, we read in the evening at the fireplace those fairy tales to all of us, and it was just nice and discuss it and so on. It is such wonderful material, and it's said that many schools don't have time for fairy tales anymore. And when I go to give these lectures for teachers and so on, I says, please read the story without showing them the pictures. Read the stories, the original text if possible, not the watered down version. And maybe afterwards let the child illustrate the story, but don't show anything. I remember one teacher stood up and in one of my classes says, oh, I know exactly what you say. When I was a little child, we read the story of Cinderella, and I heard the story, the teacher was reading it to us, and in my mind I knew the castle, it was me, it was beautiful, it was wonderful, and then suddenly she turned the book around and she showed us the picture of the story. And I realized that my picture was all wrong.
Yeah. But you do illustrate, so...
I do illustrate, but I stay away from fairy tales.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Although I have illustrated one fairy tale, which is a Bremen town musician, because I come from Bremen, and my editor made a pleaded me to do that book. And furthermore, it didn't have really these archetypes in there, it's just fun animals in there. So it didn't have the witches, the kings and queens and so on, magic in it. It was just straightforward animal stories. So I just said, all right, I will do it for this one, but I wouldn't do the other stories because they're powerful.
What do you think makes a person a storyteller? I mean, what motivated you to be a storyteller? So.
Well, if you go by Maria Garcia Marquez, he said he writes book to be loved more. It's a terrible reason. I don't know whether it worked out for him.
Well, I think the arts have a lot of that.
Yeah, I think that is one of the major reasons why many people want to do that. I personally think I have fun doing it. But when people come to me and so on who want to make books, I think they only find two reasons why people mostly want to do books. A is they think once you make some books, once you're famous, you're loved more, and it's that your life is so much easier, which is a myth, but it's okay. You never get enough love if you don't create it within yourself. And the other one is, I think people have the desperate need to teach children. And there's, oh, I've got this great story, and will help children of this and this, etc., which is all a very nice idea. But if you really discuss it further with them, it's usually an issue that the person hasn't solved within themselves, really. And you cannot really play with a story if that problem is your own story still. We select stories, even non-fiction stories, usually according to what we need to learn in our own life. It happened to me over and over again. Virtually all my 200 stories, unless they were given to me by a publisher, are stories, are issues in my own life which I had to clear up first before I could make a book of it. I tell you a typical story with I Will Always Love You. It's a story which was inspired by Dr. Kübler-Ross. That it's very important to say I love you to anybody close to you, verbalize it, because people who grieve excessively after somebody dies is somebody who thinks they have never verbalized I love you to the person who has died. Now, this is a little story about a dog who dies. And as I was starting that book and working, I suddenly realized that I never said that to my parents. So I said, I can't make this book. This is the reason why I make this book, and I have to say that to my parents. So that was very difficult because the word love does hardly exist in the German language. We don't use that word. I mean, in America we use, I love the flowers, I love your outfit, I love your smile, I love everything, I love the ice cream and the weather. But in Germany we don't use that, and we most certainly hardly use it ever to close relatives. It is assumed, but it is never verbalized, at least not at the time when I grew up. And so I said, but I have to do this. I cannot make this book until I have done it because I cannot play with the story. So it was a time before computers, and I wrote a letter, a long letter, and somewhere I put into this letter, I love you, to my parents. It was very difficult, but I did it, and I sent it off, and so on. So after 2 or 3 weeks, I get a letter back from my parents that says, oh, thank you very much, nice to hear from you, how you are, although we were not quite sure what you were after. That's a typical reaction. But I think it's important for us. We have to heal ourselves first. We cannot heal the outside world.
Oh, no. Did you feel relieved that you finally got it out?
This is their love. I just have to, I can only deal with myself. The only person I can change is me. What they take from it is their thing. But I'm the one who has to clear up everything for myself.
And then you could write the book on it.
And then, of course, it became, because then you can play with it.
And that's one of your most successful ones.
That is one of the most successful one, yeah. If you are still so drenched in your own trouble and so on, you become so heavy-handed. I mean, we all have seen movies which are done with a heavy-handed, this message. You come out exhausted, and the last thing you want to go is to on the road to fight for that cause, because it wasn't given to you in a digestive way, but you have to throw in some humor, some lightheartedness. Shakespeare did this wonderful with with the Scottish play, with Hamlet, or whatever it is, and they were so dreary, so not dark and heavy, but there was always some jester in it or some light in it. Somewhere you always had a little bit of light in it, otherwise you could never digest it. And out of this, then you can really communicate with a person. That's why I use humor very often in my books, because it's a wonderful way to say hello to my reader. And then I can take them to death and anything else. It's a wonder way.
Did you, but you also have your book on courage, I know, is more for adults as well. Are you ever thinking of going into the more adult besides that book, or staying with children?
I tell you, most of my children's books, I think virtually all, unless they're really baby books, are all for all ages.
Right.
They must please me first. And
you have a universal theme underneath.
yeah, and a good story is for all ages. It's just that if you want to write it for children, it's double or triple hard. I mean, to tell a good story to an adult, it's relatively easy. But to tell them for children, you are really in a very, very difficult, a very challenged kind of mind, with a very honest kind of audience. I mean, you are competing with television, you are competing with computer, with iPhone, with iPod, with Twitter, you name it, everything, and Facebook and so on, and you have this quiet book there. And you have it with an audience which cannot be impressed by how many books you have sold, how famous you are, or how many prizes you have won. But it's of no interest to the kid. And also the reviews about your books. Kids don't read book reviews. So all these things which may be important for an adult are totally unimportant for a child. So once a child, if you read a story to a child and the child doesn't like it, it moves away, just says, oh, it stinks, or just plays with something else. A child is honest like nothing else.
I think they can sense the tone if it's too preachy, or
it can be too preachy, it can be just not interesting, it can be just boring.
Yeah.
It can be just wrong. It just may not be the right thing. It cannot be entertaining. It cannot be fun enough, or whatever it is. It cannot be gripping enough. So, but the child is very honest. It doesn't fight with you, doesn't argue with you, it just moves away and says, thank you. Now, adults don't do that. Adults fall for the emperor's new clothes syndrome. It says, oh, the emperor is beautiful. And the little child says, hey, that emperor is naked. That's why it's so difficult to write for children. Many people think, oh, I make a little story for children, should be easy. If Hans can do it with his broken English, I can do that too. And most likely they can. But it's tough. It's very tough, and gets tougher and tougher every year. I did not have that competition, the visual competition of all the other gadgets we have today, when I started off some 30 years ago. But today, whew, it's an avalanche.
There's a lot of books, yeah, but it's
not the books I'm talking about. Yeah. I'm talking about computers and television and et cetera, et cetera.
And kids are not, parents aren't reading to their kids as much, or?
That may be true, they don't read, but they read at school, and so they do have sense. But I think it's not that. It's if a book is book is really right, it doesn't matter whether parents read or not parents. It is, if a Harry Potter comes out and it's a good book, whatever you do, it's a great, great read. And kids love it, and they read books like this and complicated ones. Yeah. I remember my editor always used to say, oh, don't use all these difficult words, make it easy, tone it down, and so on. Dumb it down, basically what she meant. But no, it's the opposite. Kids want challenges, they want difficult words, and so on. And Harry Potter is this wonderful example of, if you really know how to be a wonderful writer, and she is a genius. Yeah, well, she deserves every penny she has ever made.
She didn't, think of marketing it to the audience. She just did what she wanted to do.
She did. She was in love with it. I think this, as an artist, is a key. You must be in love in what you are doing. If you're not in love with what you are doing, nobody else will be in love with it as well. And you must really enjoy it, and you must be play with it. And she obviously was with it. And it comes across with all great artists like Mozart, Beethoven, or Michelangelo, and so on. Definitely Harry Potter is one of them.